Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Normally, when the coups take place, they are sudden, planned well, but they come like lightning, so that the government in power may not be prepared for them. But last month, on the 21st of April, which was the 60th anniversary of a coup, attempted coup, way back in 1961, and then the French military attempted a coup. And on the same day, 60 years later, 23 retired generals of the army, supported by not only army but the police, the Suret, and others, sent a letter to the president of France threatening coup, threatening civil war. And this letter was an open letter published on a website as well as in the media. It's an extraordinary intervention by the army into a political life. Normally, military everywhere in the world is supposed to be apolitical, except in the countries like Pakistan, where military is the main deciding factor as far as the political scene is concerned. But in democracies like India, like USA, like Canada, England, France, Germany, military is supposed to be apolitical, have no relationship at all in the politics. Of course, they have their rights, but active politics, like with the bureaucrats, is a no-no. So this was an extraordinary letter. 150 years back, in 1861, the Paris Commune and the massacre of the monarch, the comrades, by the army was there. And this letter alludes to the military intervention at that time. And as a result of that killing, there was almost a civil war. And it was provoked by the complacency of the French. Now, this letter says that the French are suffering from the same complacency. At that time, the fear was of the communists. Now, the fear is of Islamists. And the connection between the fascist threats and the growth of the working class struggle is obvious all the time. But then, when religion permeates the culture and the traditions of a country, then it's something, especially if it's an alien religion, then it's fraught with danger. In 2019, there was a conflict with the Yellow Vest, the real strike against pension cards. And at that time, the retired general, Villiers, had demanded firmness in police repression of the protesters. He said, no, nothing doing. And he was retired then. He was addressing Macron and the parliament, and he demanded greater patriotism and very clearly said, France is in peril, several mortal dangers threaten it. Now that we are ready to support policies aimed at safeguarding the nation. So it was a pure patriotic talk. No political, that, okay, let the government take action and we'll support the government. But that letter exudes hatred for the working class. And the same letter now is further reinforced. It denounces Islamism. It condemns post colonial theories as divisive. And is very clear that the drastic diseases need drastic remedies. So repression is required. Macron's proposed fascist law targeting the so-called Islamic separatism according to these military officers, is just a disintegration process, which with the Muslims and the suburban hosts, basically, they are not civilized. It's leading to the separation of the parts of the society. It's transforming them into territories subject to dogmas rather than to constitution. And that's a reality. Let's not forget. In England, for example, there are areas which are called by police no-go areas. Police doesn't go in. They can kill each other, they can do anything, they may have their own Sharia courts. Similarly, till recently, there were no-go areas in Norway and Denmark. But then those Scandinavian countries took strong action. Some people were arrested. But in Italy, these no-go areas are very strong. And that is because of the proximity to Turkey. So this fear that the country is being divided where the constitution and the law is not important, but racialism, indigenous nationalism, and decolonialism are those which are dividing the country. The intensity and the scale of the massacre refuse the idea that the target is a team of postmodern academic researchers. They are not journalists, they are not researchers, they have been people who have fought the war. And the target is a broader uprising. The last few lines of the letter are extremely telling. If nothing is done, I'm reading it out. Lexley will continue to spread inexorably through the society, ultimately causing an explosion, an intervention of our active comrades in a perilous mission to protect our civilizational values and safeguard our compatriots on the national territory. We see it's no longer time to procrastinate, or else tomorrow's civil war will put an end to this growing cry. Look, this is no longer time to procrastinate. That tomorrow there'll be a civil war. Now, this time General Villiers didn't sign the letter, but made it clear that the cliques of the army plus are working precisely in such a way. The thought patterns are the same. And basically, this is a reflection on the alternative to the parliamentary democracy as it is, which is dictatorship. As a matter of fact, when the civil society degenerates into chaos, either because of the civil disturbance, or because of laxity, or because of the extreme disobedience to law and order, then a strong man emerges. It also happens when there's economic disaster. It also happens when there's a pandemic, and that's why I've always saying that the fear of the pandemic, coronavirus, is in fact going to germinate into dictatorships all over the world. And this Saturday, I'm publishing a new article where I'll show how the third wave of authoritarianism is coming, and nobody can tell it. But coming back to this letter, now look at the identity of the signatories. There's a foreign legion general, Christian Pekumal, and he's the first person to sign it. He was arrested, disbarred from army for wearing a uniform during an anti-immigrant demonstration in Calais in 2016. Another general, Dominic, is campaigning against social distancing measures in coronavirus. And he argues very strangely that it's not as lethal as people want it to be. Two other signatories are General Emmanuel and Philip. They are members of the subsisting families of the French nobility. And the significance of the letter cannot be underscored in any way. Let's be very clear. and not only nationally but also in the international context. Because what's happening, and in case coup takes place, civil war takes place, the repercussions would be felt not only in European Union countries, but it will give a hint to the people in, especially in Italy, Spain, and Scandinavian countries, the righteous forces, to come up and tell the Islamists either you conform to the national system. Religion is okay, but all this talk of hijab and Sharia has got to stop. And the context of this letter has also got to be understood in the context of breakdown of the capitalistic democracy. As a matter of fact, this very thought I was discussing the other day, that the people who ask that Modi should call the army are in fact committing harakiri, suicide. Once you call the army, then who knows the army would ever go back, and why should they? Suppose General Rawat comes to assist the government at a national level. Coming at a local level once or twice is perfectly justified. But if you hand over the complete country to them, then you become superfluous. So you can easily say, why should I not be the martial law administrator for the whole life? That's what happened. And you know, wherever the army has been there, the results have been disastrous, whether it was Uganda's, or General Sohoto in Indonesia, or General Devin in Myanmar, and so on and so forth. But this breakdown of the capitalist democracy has been undermined by 3 decades of rising social inequality that we cannot deny. So, buckling under that and then destruction of the cultural system of France has been responsible for that. And this trend is accelerating internationally. In USA, for example, on the 6th of January, though the president didn't call for the coup, but it was, in fact, an attempt to make the Congress understand that this cannot be understood. Retired Spanish top brass declared their fascist sympathies openly, and they called for killing of 26 million Spanish citizens. In France, it's very clear that the capital class will use 2022 elections. Next year is the election year. And whatever the outcome, you would see either a dictatorship of a person or of an ideology. And the beauty is that this letter was published on 21st of April. And 23rd of April, Marine Le Pen, the leader of the nationalist rally, hailed the attitude of these generals and called them to support her candidacy next year. She noted that the degree of concern shows by the general shows that deterioration, and then they require a democracy in which the search for the political solutions are concretized by a project of change that must be confirmed by the vote in France. Now, her decision to salute the generals is basically a clumsy attempt. It confirmed the national union led by Le Pen would be reactionary and would not tolerate Islamism. Naturally, the result would be bad. And then, do you think that when you throw a challenge to the government, it's not going to be answered, replied to? The Minister for the Armed Forces in Macron government, Florence Parly, immediately reacted and she tried to minimize the whole affair. Look, that is stupidity. You cannot minimize it. You can. The reality is there. If you try to remove the shadow, it doesn't remove the substance. So she called it irresponsible and wrong. And she said that these military officers do not represent the army, they are only representing themselves. But then she was a more responsible militarist. And she said that our military institution, the French military institution, is not politicalized. Now, this is wrong. French military system is fully politicalized and not from today, right from the days of President de Gaulle. So, while pursuing anti Muslim policies, the government is promoting ultra reactionary and righteous policies. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So, the governments have to wake up and stop mollycoddling Islamists. Macron is no alternative to Le Pen. Let's be very clear. The Social Equality Party is coming strong. Now imagine when Paul said that this they don't represent the army, but a number of serving officials, soldiers, policemen, Suret, they have bagged the warning and they complained very clearly that the laxist policies would result in chaos and it would require our intervention on active duty to protect our civilization. So when the active soldiers join hands with the retired ones, that should send a clear signal. And then the point is the general claim that the France was disintegrating. Yes, that's right. If there are no go zones, if despite the government action, the teachers can be decapacitated and beheaded, and the ambassador in a foreign country can be expelled because of the demand of the population, as it happened in Pakistan. The French ambassador was expelled, and the generals are accusing President Macron government of fanning the flames of hatred. And they are very clear that there would be a sudden explosion. Now, Emmanuel Macron is no child. So he says on the one side, he has said, I'm going to take very strong action and protect the French culture and French civilization. And then he threatens to punish soldiers who have called for civil war against him. As a matter of fact, there's a law that the army is supposed to be non-political. So they can be prosecuted for violating the law. But when you prosecute serving soldiers, it sends waves of discontent. And those, even if they have violated the duty of reserve, sanctions are planned. Because there's a sneaking sympathy with the brother officers. Let's not forget that they could terminate a former general of French Foreign Legion way back in 1980s. But that may not, you can terminate a general, but then taking action against thousand odd people serving and retired is going to have a bad time. And this is basically a challenge to Macron ahead of the next year's presidential election. The Industrial Minister has joined the attack, and she says 60 years back, generals had started such a coup against de Gaulle. Yes, but then don't forget, de Gaulle had immediately recovered and accepted those demands. So Macron has been more sensible. He has said that, okay, we are going to respond to weaponization of Islam. He says, I'll lead my people and chastise radical Islamists for their extremist approach that is incompatible with the French way of life. So this is being diplomatic and is taking the wind of the sails of the generals. He has introduced legislation himself which seeks to destroy the threat of Islamist France, symbols of the clothing, Expressing religious faith in public would be banned. Switzerland had banned building church masjids with minarets. The same might happen here. They are also proposing legislation including prohibition of religion. They have also said that the facilities of citing players in the hallways, malls, and the public places should be banned. So all those things which were being handed over as goodies to Islamists are in fact sought to be withdrawn. Now, let's not deny that the Islamists, the radical Islamists, have been digging their own grave. They have forgotten that they, by their premature actions, are destroying themselves. With every attack on the cultural system, on other people, they are confirming and reinforcing the resolve to fight back against Islamic extremism. Now comes the major issue. It may not develop into civil war, but can it have repercussions anywhere else? Yes. It would have repercussions definitely in Europe. As I said, in Italy, France, Scandinavian countries, and maybe even in Germany. And the second is that Austria's example and the Hungary's example would be replicated. That means dictatorship. And where the Muslims, even ordinary Muslims who are honest, who have no say in being Islamists, who are moderate, they'll be punished. They will be harassed. They'll be put to trouble. So innocents would suffer. Then this would spill across the border of France and Europe even. There'll be a reaction in Turkey. Now, Turkey is the only Muslim country, and it's becoming rapidly Islamist. Then the impact can also be in countries like India, where there's all, despite the basic unity, there are clear dividing lines. But more than in India, it would be in Sri Lanka, it would be in Thailand, it would be in Indonesia. The stronger the action against the Islamists in Europe, the stronger the action against Christians in Pakistan and Indonesia. So this is going to spill over and become a global issue. And not only that, the political system would also change, as I said, from democracy to dictatorship. What level of dictatorship? It will change from country to country. But as a whole, this is going to be something which may not be in the interest of mankind, political stability, and humanity. But this is also a wake up call, not only to the rabid radical Islamists, but to all rabid followers of religious fundamentalism. That if you want to live in peace, have your religion in your homes. Don't make a public display. And don't force others to accept your dogmas, traditions, or venerate them. You are welcome to venerate your ideas, but you have no right to ask others, impose your will on them. Otherwise, the recoil would make you suffer. And the ultimate responsibility for the disaster would be yours. So this is a wake-up call to both, but primarily to rabid fundamentalists of Islam and any other dogma or religion. Thank you.